Now, the Betty and Barney Hill case was one of the first famous popularized accounts of an alien abduction. Um, to put it simply, the this interracial couple, Betty being white and Barney being black, they lived in New Hampshire, I believe. This was 1961. They loved each other very much. They they're driving down a road at night. Um, a craft, as it's popularly told, a craft comes down. They're taken aboard. Their examinations, and then they're released. And then they go through hypnosis sessions later, where they recount, they begin to remember and they recount all this stuff from memory under hypnosis. Now then after that, there were lots of accounts reported of alien abductions. Okay, to give you a broad view, okay, before this happened, this was in 1961, like September 18th, I believe, September 18th or 17th, it was at night, 1961. Before that, in 1947, the wave of modern UFO sightings began. During World War II, there were sightings of Foo Fighters. Pilots would report encounters with Foo Fighters. And then after 1947, UFO sightings increased, the public became more aware of UFO sightings. And then somewhere in the 1950s and continuing on into the 60s and onward, you had a contactee phenomenon where there would be someone who would write a book or otherwise popularize claims that he had met with extraterrestrials from planets usually from within our own solar system, sometimes from other planets out beyond the solar system, and they would ask him to be their messenger, to bring about peace, and this is sometimes tied in with cult-like phenomenon, cult-like situations where the person claiming all these sightings, there would be multiple sightings. Like it actually became a contest where each newer contactee claimed more sightings, and that the sightings began earlier than a previous contactee. So anyway, in that environment, you also had witnesses reporting just alien beings. You had various alien being reports. There were UFO groups that sprang up. These were civilian groups that had on their staffs had various members with technical backgrounds, hopefully technical backgrounds, or some kind of expertise like astronomy or some kind of scientific background, hopefully. There were NICAP, National, I can't remember what NICAP stands for, but NICAP, MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and APRO, Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization. These sprang up. Okay, back to Betty and Barney Hill. I took quite a few notes. I'll recount the travel that they made, and I'll mention particular points because they will become relevant later on. Okay, so it's at night. They're traveling along State Route 3. It's a rural, forested, mountainous area. They're concerned about an upcoming storm. And by the way, this information I got from a YouTube channel called Fire of Learning, or Fire for Learning. Look that up and look up the specific episode about Betty and Barney Hill. Okay, that's in addition to what I read years and years ago, like decades ago, about this case in many UFO books. Yes, I did. I I do own or did own The Interrupted Journey, which is the book published in 1966 by John Fuller that popularized this. I believe it was also mentioned in Look magazine. Okay, so back to the case. Okay, so they were traveling along State Route 3 after a vacation trip. I think they're headed toward. I think they're in New Hampshire, if I recall. It's a rural, forested, mountainous area. They're concerned about an upcoming storm. There's a brief night stop in Colebrook at about 10:30 p.m. Then they're traveling just south of Lancaster. Betty sees a bright light south in the southwest sky near the moon. It's shooting upwards. They continue further. The object becomes brighter. They stop several times to see the object through binoculars. Usually it's Barney who's viewing it through the binoculars. They stop near Cannon Mountain with the object being to their right. They're going in one direction and the object seems to be going in the opposite direction. I know this may seem monotonous or like tedious, me mentioning all this information, but it will become relevant later on. So they're going in one direction, it's going in the opposite direction apparently. It stops, it turns around and moves towards them. They stop again and see it passing in front of the moon. It's a cigar-shaped object flashing a series of red, amber, green, and blue lights. And then they see the light disappear as it moves behind Cannon Mountain and then reappear near the rock formation. I guess there's a rock formation called the Old Man of the Mountain. And then it's going in the same direction as the car. They stop the car at Indian Head when the light is directly in front and not more than a couple of tree heights high. After a while, they continued traveling in the car, and there are two periods in which they hear some kind of a sound which they characterize as like a tuning fork sound. And then they're at Ashley. It sounded like Ashley. Admittedly, I didn't look up to see the spelling of it, but Ashley. And then they reach Route 93. All right, then they eventually arrive home. They notice that they notice strange things. They're feeling weird, but they can't really understand why. They notice some strange things. The binoculars have a broken strap. The food, they decide to throw the food away that they had. Both Benny and Barney's watches have stopped, and Betty had a compulsion for some reason to leave something out of the house. Not sure what I wrote there. Betty's dress now has torn spots on it, torn areas on it, and there's a stain. She has it in a closet and for 3 years and doesn't take it out for 3 years. Then Barney has a compulsion to check his groin. Okay, so that night, it seems to be that night, that's when Betty calls her sister. Barney had known somewhat about UFOs. He was aware vaguely about what the public knew about UFOs, but not very much. That wasn't very much. And Betty hadn't gotten into reading books about UFOs or anything about UFOs. She did have relatives who claimed to have sightings of UFOs. Um, so she calls her sister, and the sister calls a physicist, and the physicist recommends that Betty take her compass and go out. Their car has spots on it, and I think they mention how large the circular spots are. But the compass would react to the areas of the spots on the car. Then they decide to, by Betty and Barney decide to split up and draw sketches of what they remembered. Um, it's odd because, yes, see, this is where it becomes odd. Um, they in future hypnosis sessions they recall seeing figures. So I'm wondering what they recall drawing sketches of. They were, I guess, they were drawing sketches of the figures, but I'm not sure if they, I'm not sure if they had recalled seeing figures at this point in the story. Now, of course, if you watch a documentary or something or mention about this case, they conflate what they were, Betty and Barney Hill reported under hypnosis with the actual trip itself. So it's vague as to what they recalled under hypnosis, what was not, what they recalled at the time. But anyway, my impression from seeing Fire, this video I mentioned earlier, Fire of Learning, they separated to separate rooms so as not to bias each other, and they make drawings of what they recalled, and then Betty begins researching UFOs. That would mean, I guess, reading books about UFOs. At some point, they don't talk much about it. Their local church, they mention it to somebody, but they don't make it widespread. They get into contact with Dr. Benjamin Simon. Dr. Simon puts them each under hypnosis, and then after each hypnosis session, they're about when it's all said, and after all the sessions, there are about I think 11 hours of hypnosis sessions. After each session, he puts in a post-hypnotic suggestion, or it puts in a post-hypnotic command, so they won't remember what they recalled under hypnosis. So that way, they won't be able to bias each other or share information until all these sessions until the end of these hypnosis sessions, until the end of this whole investigation into their memory, or this whole hypnosis project. So at the end of all these hypnosis sessions, they felt better. They felt like a weight had been lifted off their shoulders, and Dr. Simon, figured several different possible explanations. One is that it's a hoax, but I think he negated that as unlikely because it would have to be a pretty extensive hoax. I don't know how he came to that conclusion. It could have been that this really happened. That would be extraordinary, literally. Or that it's or that they're delusional, like mentally ill, and he, having gotten to know them, figured that Barney and Betty Hill didn't seem, mentally ill to that extreme. Or the other possibility, which is what I think happened, which was that Betty's dreams, which she began having about 10 days after this incident, after this trip, influenced her to recount those dreams. It kind of fed into the hypnosis sessions. And I'm more fascinated by what caused these dreams to manifest as they did. Um, in other words, it's my guess that I'm persuaded from the evidence here that there were several external stimuli that influenced her to have certain dreams, and then 10 days after the incident, and then when they were doing hypnosis, the dreams she recalled, or the dreams she recalled during the hypnosis sessions. Okay, so what did she recall during the hypnosis? What did both of them recall during the hypnosis sessions? Well, as I told you before, Dr. Simon carefully hypnotized them separately in a lot of aspects of the experience. If you take an overall experience, an abduction experience, there were many similarities. However, there were some inconsistencies, and Betty seemed to remember more about the incident than Barney did. Barney seemed to have his eyes closed and so forth. They both recalled these beings. I must have not mentioned a certain key thing. Okay, all right. Let me jump back. Okay, I forgot I'd written more on the other page. Okay, so during the trip, okay, so they realized back at the cigar-shaped object with the flashing sequence of red, amber, green, and blue lights, they see the light disappear as it moves behind Cannon Mountain, and then reappear near the rock formation called the Old Man of the Mountain. It's going in the same direction as the car. They stop the car at Indian Head when the light is directly in front, and not more than a couple of trees high above them. And then after a while, they hear the two tuning fork sounds. Okay, and then they go towards Ashley and then reach State Route 93. The beeping first. I have here Barney's first hypnosis. Okay. They're the men at Indian Head. There, I don't remember how many. I think it's irrelevant at this point. There are several figures. He describes them as wearing black uniforms with scarves over their shoulders. Meanwhile, Betty recalls. I think Barney has the leader wearing a hat, black hat and cap, and Betty describes them as looking like they have pointed noses and hair, black hair, dark hair. They're men, and they speak amongst them. They speak to Betty and Barney Hill as if through telepathy. And sometimes there's a mention of some kind of foreign accent that they can't quite place, which seems dreamlike. And Barney describes the leaders wearing a shiny black jacket. And then there are beeping sounds. Barney oddly turns off Route 30. There's a voice in his head telling him to do that. And here we go. They drive to an orange glow-in road. Barney's eyes are closed when he's brought aboard, and Betty recalls seeing a short gray figure, or they all are short gray figures, metallic-looking gray, large eyes, large cranium, large cat-like eyes with pupils. Okay, so I can recall the rest of this from memory. Barney is taken off into another room, and meanwhile Betty is taken into like an examination room. There's a table there, and she's put, I believe, on her stomach so that her back is facing upward. It's a tiny detail. I don't know if it's relevant. As I recall, it's her back is facing. She's sitting on her front. She's on an examination table, and there's a like a gadget with several different needles, and they poke at her back, and causes great pain. And then the leader puts his hand over her forehead, and then she doesn't feel any pain anymore. She asks, "What's going on? What's he doing?" And I guess it's the leader says, there's an examiner and a leader. The leader, I believe, is the one who says, don't worry, it's just a pregnancy test. And she says, well, that's no pregnancy test here. And that source was from a UFO documentary called UFOs Are Real. So then after that, she's taken to a wall, and the leader shows her a three-dimensional map, and the leader asks her, "Do you know where you are on the map?" And she said, "No, I have no knowledge of astronomy. That's from UFOs Are Real." And he says, "Well, if you don't know where you are, then there's no point in me trying to explain where we are from." Now, the map had several circles, some larger than others. There were lines between these circles or spheres. The ones with, as the leader explained, the ones with dotted lines were expeditions, and there were some that had solid lines. Those are routine travel trips. And I think there were ones with more like double lines, something like that. So, as I recall from reading, the map then gets folded up. She asks if she can have something to take with her as evidence that this really happened, and she's permitted to take a book with her. And then, just as they're about to leave, Betty and Barney are about to leave, one of them says, "No, you can't take the book with you." And then they are taken out of the craft, and then they look and watch the craft as it goes up into the sky again. Now, that's what's recounted under hypnosis. I'll skip the rest of it. Dr. Simon figured that, on the one hand, it was good that this now relieved their tension and they felt happier, and he was happy about that. He hadn't been that well versed in UFOs, as I recall. That's where it stands. Okay, here's the interesting part. Okay, there was a school teacher, I think she was from Ohio. There was a school teacher who looked at the star map that was replicated. Under hypnosis, Dr. Simon asked Betty to draw the star map, and she draws the star map. It becomes published it's probably Look magazine where it was published. And there was a school teacher who looks at that map, and then this is, I think, in the 70s, figures that the stars are probably real stars that we know of, that have habitable planets, that are capable of having planets circling them that can harbor life. They're a certain type of star. And she makes a three-dimensional model of the nearby stars that could have that could suit life, that could have planets that could support life, certain types of stars. And from a certain angle, she identified, oh, look, this seems to resemble the Betty and Barney Hill map. And she identified two very large circles or spheres in the map, and that, I don't know how, but she reasoned that that was where they came from, amidst all these other circles that were in the map. And she associated them with her model, the parts in her model that represented Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli. So over time, UFO culture has sometimes called them the reticulans or the Zeta reticulans. It's based on that map. All right. So the book, now that happens in 1961. 1963, let me see. December 1963 is when they met Dr. Benjamin Simon, and then February 1964 is when the hypnosis sessions begin, and they end around June. And so then a few years later, you have John Fuller's book, The Interrupted Journey, coming out in 1966. Okay. There's someone, James D. McDonald, he retraced their journey, and he came up with another explanation. That there's an aircraft warning beacon on top of Cannon Mountain, and that may have produced the light that they regarded or interpreted as being craft, especially the way it reflected off, I guess, a mountain top. And then the large orange moon shape may have been a jack-o'-lantern advertisement. Then this is even more interesting. All right, so there was a Twilight Zone episode and 3 Outer Limits episodes airing about the time, like right before Betty and Barney began having hypnosis sessions. Okay, so there's a Twilight Zone episode called Black Leather Jackets that aired on January 31st, 1964. And then after that, let me see. There was the Bolero, that was Twilight Zone. The Outer Limits episode called The Bolero Shield aired February 10, 1964. Now that's 2 weeks before Barney's first hypnosis session. And then February 13th, an episode called The Invisibles aired, which has aliens conducting some kind of test or some kind of operation with the scalpel. And then there's an episode of The Outer Limits called The Children of Spider County, which involved the abduction of 4 men. That aired February 17, 1964. Now that was 5 days before the February 22nd session. Okay, so you see what I'm getting at, that perhaps they had been exposed, perhaps they had seen these episodes, and then under hypnosis, or perhaps in their dreams, they merged the images of these aliens having large eyes and hardly any mouth and so forth, and the concepts of abduction and scalpel and so forth, into their dream, and then into these hypnosis sessions. Okay, now I get to the Travis Walton case. These may be linked. So the book is out, and it was on NBC, and I have it down somewhere in my iPhone. I don't want to look it up now, but in 1975, the fall of 1975, I think something like September, on NBC, as I recall, it's a Monday evening, the docudrama portraying this incident called the UFO incident airs. And after that, within, I can't remember how long, it's something like a week or 5 days or something like that. Very soon after that, there are several men who are in Sitgraves National Forest, and they have their job is to cut down trees, and their contracts and so forth. Well, one of them is Travis Walton. This story, by the way, is known as the Travis Walton case. Later became published in the book The Walton Experience, and then in I think it was 1993, something like that, came out as a feature film movie. The only earlier time that this was dramatized that I know about was on TV. There was an episode devoted to UFO cases. I think there were UFO abductions, and it was dramatizing UFO abduction. There weren't that many. It was like 1 hour long, 45 minutes or something. But one of the cases was dramatizing this event. It was the only other time. And before that, one of my first exposures to it was in that documentary I mentioned before from like 1980 or 1979 called somewhere around there called called UFOs Are Real, in which Travis Walton is shown being interviewed, and he recounts what's happened. And here's the story that he tells. He and these men of his, their group of